Hello, this is Dennis, and I'm coming to you poolside this morning. It is 82 degrees here in Texas, which feels absolutely amazing and balmy. I'm sure to you all in the Northeast, it would probably feel hot and oppressive, but hey, after we hit 114 and made a record here of all times in Waco, this is great. So today, I'm going to try to put this, I won't be in 2 minutes, it'll be over, but I'm going to kind of go over adult learning here in the digital age. And I do have on my camera, it's supposed to be down here in the bottom corner, and I don't know, it doesn't actually show up here on my Camtasia. So when we look at technology, we're looking at different things like internet access. So how much internet access do we actually have throughout the world, and what is the access to people? How strong it is it broadband, dial-up, different things like that. Devices used, are we using computers, tablets, smartphones? I myself, I have a desktop at the office. I have one here at the house. I bought this laptop for this class specifically. I have an iPad Pro and I've got an iPhone. So there's multiple devices used. One thing talking to my students, they use a lot of multiple devices. I have a lot of students that actually just have tablets now. They don't actually have computers that they do. Social media is a big thing. So Twitter, Facebook, but we also have our different Google drives and different types of media like that we can use socially together, and that's something that continually increases. Now we have Marco Polo on our phones to where you can sit there and video chat between people and things like that. Our demands for online learning. So we have our things such as our traditional brick and mortar institutions like I work at, where we offer a lot of online education at now. We have things like the massive or online open courses or MOOCs that have been developed out there. And then you have the self-directed things like going to Google. Google's totally changed the way of the world and has dramatically caused a decrease in encyclopedia sales. We have Wikipedia, and of course, if you want to find out that you're dying, you have WebMD. And then we look at the world and even the communities we look at, and we see, well, what is our digital divide? So how many people actually have access to all these things in the internet and all this in the world, and how many do not? So when we look at the World Wide Web, one thing when you look at numbers in math is that the hard numbers don't actually change, but you can always present numbers in a certain way that actually makes percentages and things look totally different. So one way we can do this is by a pie chart. And by a pie chart, it looks like Asia is way outpacing the world for internet usage at 48.7%, and it seems like North America is really falling behind at 8.3% by using this pie chart. While these numbers actually do hold true on percentages, you kind of got to look at population. And so this is actually a better way for me to actually look at it. So if you look at it in world regions, Asia has over 4 billion people living in it. They make up 55% of the world population, but only 48% of them are connected, a little bit over 2 billion people, which is an amazing amount. They have gone up a growth from 2000 to 2018 of 1,670%. With 48.7% or nearly 50% penetration to all the people in Asia. And of course, leading this has to be the growth of the internet in places like India and China for sure. Africa lags behind the rest of the world dramatically. Percent world population is a little bit over 1 billion people, or nearly 17%, but they only have 453 million internet users. So only about a third of people in Africa. While they've had the most growth, they're definitely the furthest behind. Said the pie chart makes it seem like 4.8% or 8.3% of the world's internet usage in North America is a very small percentage, but when you look at the fact we're only 4.8% of the world population, not even 5% the United States and Canada, and we have 300 and nearly 64 million people living in the United States and Canada, and yet we have nearly 346 million of them connected to the internet. We now have a penetration rate of 95%. So lastly on here, it's the total number of world users. So there's roughly 7.6 billion people in the world. That's probably gone up since this was published in December 31st, 2017. We have over 4 billion people using the internet. When the book was published, they were reporting 2.4 billion people. We've almost, not quite doubled the number of people using the internet in the 4 years since this book was published. And what's important here to me is this penetration. So when the book was published, 71% of American households are quoted as having internet access. access. Now it's 95%. Now, does this mean computers, hardwired and all this? No. It can be tablets, it can be smartphones, but there's some way that people can actually access the internet worldwide. And in North America, that has gone up to 95%. Europe has gone up to 85%. What's interesting is when we're talking about the digital divide, we estimate that a little bit over half the world's population now has access to the internet. And definitely the richer parts of the world, North America, United States and Canada, and Europe have the greatest percentage of use. Australia and Oceania behind it, with Australia having a very high percentage and New Zealand. And then Latin America is quickly catching up, and so is the Middle East. Both of them well above that 54.4% world average. The ones that are behind are Asia at 48%, which is coming up very fast. And that divide is supposed to be closing very closely on the 50% and going beyond that. And then Africa. And while Africa, there's a lot of growth there, there's still a lot of issues of trying to get connectivity throughout, especially in remoteness or due to poverty. So one thing that came up in the reading and the book and everything is how do we ensure quality of online education? And so spend a lot of time on this. And at our school, one thing that we look at is we have got a fairly good system of going through to make sure that we have quality of online educations, and we have what we call PGP, which is Principle of Good Practice, and you can pause on any of this stuff and read it as I go through it. But I decided to do a PGP here for you, Dr. Heaney, on your class to see how it would match up. And the thing is that we don't actually have a PGP for face-to-face classes. And actually, for us in higher education, we don't actually have to get certifications for the most part to teach face-to-face. You do for those of you all in K through 12, you have to have some type of teaching certificate to go along with that. But for me, I came out of practice and went into a classroom. Now, they did give me different classes. I had to learn what Bloom's taxonomy was. I had a mentor-mentee program that I had to go through. You can hear the katydids. They're starting to sing in the background back here. A lot of the different things that I have to do for an online class, I don't actually have to do for a face-to-face class. So while the book said issues with doing online and trying to make sure the quality is there, if you have the right checks and balances, I actually think that the online education can actually be superior to that of face-to-face. So right here, I put in the course information, Dr. Heaney, Department's ACE, Internet, it's going to be on there, publisher site, because we're not using Brightspace, we're using Canvas. Right here, everything so far that I've seen has been fair use and is not infringing, no copyright infringement whatsoever. We're not using Brightspace, which we've gone to at MCC, so I have down Canvas. And then training. So we, as online educators at MCC, have to go through an online teaching course to be certified and be able to teach online, and that's called Effective Online Instruction, or EOI. Mine was completed in 2015, so Dr. Heaney, I gave you that date. We have to show communication. So how are we actually going to talk? I don't have to do this for face-to-face. It's kind of assumed that I would, but trust me, we've all had that professor that in college that we had almost no communication from whatsoever. But here, I actually have to show it. So I figured out about 25% of our communication is through online announcements. We have to read every week, and he has on there exactly what we have to do and how it's lined out. Discussion boards, massively our way of talking, probably greater than 50%, but for this I put down 50%. Emails, I do get little emails from you, Dr. Heaney, about different things that I need to do, and so that's about 12.5%, and then 12.5%, there's some different chat, IM, text message systems that we could probably use on here too. So we do have a good way of assuring communication. The one area that we are a little bit weak on is ADA, and the reason why I can't check this box off for ADA is the different videos we use. If we're using anything that's YouTube based, while it does have closed captioning that you can put on there, YouTube will tell you that their closed captioning they do not see is actually meeting with ADA. So a lot of times when you're using content that's not your own, you really can't check this unless you go back to that content yourself, put it into a different format, and are able to subtitle it or figure out some way to put that with it. And so I did not actually see a way that we actually do that here, and so we're not actually meeting that. But I would also say in a lot of classrooms, we're not meeting ADA either. This is things that we check off. We have the dean checks off on this too, but the instructor goes through and the syllabus checks this off, and then it's confirmed by our Centers for Teaching and Learning, CTL, and by your program director and your dean. So some of the different things are orientation materials. So how do we tell the students, how do they get started? Is it detailing how to navigate the course? Does it go over what the minimal technical skills are needed for the students and what the technology they're going to need is? When they actually go through your class and look at it online. Is it easy and logical and consistent and effective in its navigation? Does the design facilitate easy readability and does not make a lot of distractions? Do you have proper hyperlinks to all the different software and hardware recommendations? Do you have all the other hyperlinks to information needed for viewers and browsing and plugins? All that we have. We have the hyperlink to the library. We have the hyperlink to information about student support services, the phone number, and technical supports. The only thing I didn't see is a backup plan if our technology fails, which is usually a box that's usually not checked onto this for online. You can do it for hybrid, and I can check this off for hybrid. If my technology fails, we just covered in class. But for a straight online, if the server system goes down, it's really hard to have a backup plan for that. And I'm not even sure what my school's is. We have one for SACS, for our accreditation body, but it's not always published, so I'm not really sure, so I had to leave that one blank. Pedagogical review. This is actually not checked off by me, but this is actually checked off by my program director, double checked by the dean and CTL to make sure that outcomes are to the rigor that are needed for the awarding of the degree. You have appropriate interaction between faculty and students, and that you have proper feedback to the students, and everything is done in a timely manner. Once again, we don't always have this in face-to-face. We don't have this review, and so that's why I say online can actually be better in some ways if you have this check and balance system. My check is that my program director and my dean will come in one class out of the semester and watch me teach. Guess what? I'm on my best behavior and doing my best teaching probably then for them, because I'm teaching to them to show I'm really good. But here on online, they can sit there and check you and make sure that you're actually doing these things and in real time without making you. They can be Big Brother without actually having a camera to like spy on you the whole time. They just get to go back and see what the data is. Syllabus and stuff, this is actually gone over, and we check it off the dean, CTL, everybody else to make sure that prerequisites are clearly stated, policies and procedures are in there, requirements for books like we had here, an introduction by the instructor. If there's an adjunct instructor teaching the class, if there's some way that there's a full-time faculty or department head that the student can get in touch with if the adjunct is not available. I forgot to check it, but the MCC ADA statement, we do have an ADA statement, and that was my fault for not checking it off on this right here. Students asked to introduce themselves, did that. Measurable course learning objectives are clearly stated, yes. Measurable module and unit learning. Student interaction requirements clearly stated. Learning activities to promote interaction. Calendar of the class. Due dates of assignments. Proctor testing if needed. And guidelines for feedback. All that is done. And once again, this is something that we check off and make sure it's there for quality of online instruction. We don't actually do this with face-to-face. And I dare say not many institutions I would know would do something like this face-to-face, but yet we do this for online. Finally, checked off that it's met all the different things for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools and by the school policy. And so this is actually checked off by the dean after they review it, and then there's a place down below where actually CTL also signs off on this too. Online education can be just as effective, and actually if you go through the steps that we went through, I think even more effective, because there's actually a check and balance if it's done properly. And the future is now. So I have had interactions with other faculty at my school that teach for other online institutions, one for Colorado Christian University. And what was interesting for them is they give her the whole course shell, and she's able to add things, but the minimum basis is there. And a lot of the different tests and all that are already assigned. And so it's kind of interesting, but then she gets to do projects, add things on top of it. And she teaches 4 classes a semester for them. And so a lot of times it's amazing when we were talking about academic rigor, of actually how rigorous her class is compared to when she's teaching full-time face-to-face for us in the psychology department, that it's the exact same thing. And so this is a very fastly evolving medium right now that we're into. And there is a need for quality assurance. And I just gave an example of how we can do it. And if you have proper quality assurance there, this is every bit as good, if not possibly better in some ways than face-to-face, because there can be a way of having checks and balances. It's very important for fitting the needs of adult learners. So right now, I'm poolside, outside, and I can do this class asynchronously, and I'm not stuck into having to move from Texas to New Jersey to go through this program. And so this is a huge advantage, is fitting the needs. Most people work from 8 to 5, but they have time from 5 to 8 to do their classes, or during their lunch break or something like that. And that's what I find with a lot of my students. We had orientation yesterday for our new students entering the program, and we asked the question, how many of you all have taken an online class? And out of 20-some new students coming into our program, every single hand went up. All of them had been familiar with Blackboard and our old learning management system, or LMS. Most of them had not been to Brightspace, but luckily Brightspace seems to be fairly intuitive and will be easy for them to catch on. But we will have to do tutorials with them. But it amazed me at how many of them actually do. If we asked that same question probably 3 years ago, it would only be half the class. It's also changing the whole way that we're looking at the face of education, because through online classes now at MCC, we've actually had 4 students this spring, our first 4, that actually graduated with their Associates of Arts or Applied Science, or not Applied Science, of Science, so either in Arts or Science, in AA or AS, before they had their high school diploma. And it's not because we have all these classes available to these students in their classroom. It's because we have these classes available to them online. So we actually have kids now graduating with an Associate's on May the 15th before they got their high school diploma on May the 30th, leading to a much faster evolving change in the way that we do education, the way that brick and mortar schools do, who they have to compete against. And it also has an economic impact too. If we had to educate everybody that we've talked about, how much would it actually cost us in building more buildings? But then doing it online, we can educate more people, and we're just looking at IT space. And so for our school, it's actually meant that plans for additional lecture halls have actually gone by the wayside. Instead, we're finding more room for servers. Hope you all enjoyed this. I know I've gone over 2 minutes. You all have a great week.